Well, hello there. In this video, I'm gonna rant about parasocial relationships, because I wanna feel alive for once, and the only way I know how is public humiliation. I'm not a specialist at anything, and I'm not doing any research specifically for this video. I'm mostly going to talk about my own experiences, and I'll be glad to hear yours if you're willing to share. I'd discuss it normally on some forum, but when it comes to personal things like that, I feel more comfortable speaking into the ether rather than having a conversation, for reasons that will become apparent as I go on. From my point of view, this phenomenon isn't so much a deviation as it is a variant of the norm. You see, even so-called normal interpersonal relationships happen almost exclusively inside our heads. You interpret the other person's words and actions through the lens of your perception, and they do the same. Even if it feels like you completely understand each other, there's no way to prove that that's what's happening. We just can't connect two brains in a way that they'd have a truly direct, unadulterated exchange of thought. As a person who grew up in a codependent household, this concept has always bothered me. It makes me think that, at the end of the day, every human is and always will be alone, never truly understood by others. Look, I know I'm good at appearing nice and approachable, but when I'm not heavily editing my behavior, I'm quite an unpleasant person to be around. I'm emotionally unstable, extremely irritable and critical, but also extremely sensitive to criticism. Sometimes too clingy, sometimes too aloof. On top of that, I'm hard to please and even harder to entertain. I struggle to keep friendships, and I can't do romance for shit. It's been this way as long as I can remember, and I think the only reason for that is that I got dealt a bad hand at the start of my life. Bad genetics, troubled intrauterine development, chaotic household, you name it. But despite that, like any human being, I still have this strong urge to be accepted just as I am. And knowing damn well that it's not possible is what drives me from people and towards parasocial relationships, I think. And that, in my opinion, is completely normal. And I'm pretty sure that's what people have been doing all throughout history. And excuse my blasphemy, but I think that's one of the reasons why people created God. Speaking of gods, why don't we talk about tulpas? If you're unfamiliar with the concept, originally a tulpa was a god created by a group of people manifesting it into existence with the power of thought and prayer. No idea if anyone ever succeeded, but sounds like fun to me. As of now, tulpas have lost both their divine and communal aspects and became akin to imaginary friends, sometimes with benefits. When I was a young boy, I too participated in this highly questionable activity of forcing a tulpa. That's what the process was called. It went like this. You were supposed to create a character, an OC if you will. Although many people try to install a character from an already existing IP onto their brain, from what I heard, not many succeeded. Then you were to imagine it in as much detail as possible. The look, the smell, the feel, the voice, the mannerisms, etc. To ensure the success of the operation, you'd have to constantly imagine conversing with it, interacting with its body, keeping it in your mental view for quite a while. At the end, you supposedly got an autonomous hallucination that could think and act on its own. People have described it as running two personas on a single brain's hardware. Gee, I wonder why so many tulpa hosts worked in IT. Some claimed that they could touch their tulpa, and it could even take over their body. So I tried, and tried, and tried. I still vividly remember the character I was forcing, a jet black interdimensional creature that manifested itself as a guy in a hoodie. His name was Enoch. The more I tried, the more painful it became. I guess my belief in the whole process just wasn't strong enough, and I felt like a complete fool. At the time, I haven't yet realized I was trans, and in retrospect, I can tell that part of the reason I dropped the whole thing was good old gender envy. Deep inside, I hated the notion that this bitch-ass motherfucker could freely manifest as a guy, and I couldn't. The idea behind tulpa forcing wasn't unbelievable to me back then, and even now it doesn't feel completely ridiculous. The self-acclaimed masters of this art did straight up admit that the goal of the process was to alter your brain in a certain way. I'm not convinced that human brains are as fragile as these people make them out to be, but there's still something to it, right? It's certainly possible to imbue a hallucination into someone's brain, though I imagine it would require some horrible trauma. For a normal person, this prospect of messing with your mind for a slim chance of getting a friend sounds absolutely alien and even scary. But I've been there, and I'm not gonna make fun of Tulpa hosts. I know they're not crazy despite really wanting to be. They're just lonely like the rest of us, and that's the way they chose to deal with it. Think about it. Doesn't it sound nice to have a friend that's always there for you, that can never betray or leave you, that always knows what you want and how to make you smile, that knows your innermost thoughts and feelings and still accepts you? Isn't it worth becoming a bit crazy? You know, I kinda wish this tulpa thing actually worked. Maybe people will be less miserable then. You could argue that the same effect can be achieved if a person practices self-love and self-compassion, but do you really believe that? Do you believe that an inherently social creature can have all those needs met just by themselves? I want to believe, but I can't bring myself to just yet. As you can probably tell, I don't believe in gods either. I wish I could, but it feels like I have a built-in Occam's razor. It's not even about skepticism or anything intentional like that. Magical thinking just hasn't been on the table ever since I learned about science. No matter how hard I tried, even in my darkest moments, I just couldn't believe. If gods do exist, they don't give a fuck about humanity. We're on our own here, that's what I believe. So I don't have much to say on this type of parasocial relationship. Let's move on to icons and idols of human origin. Growing up, I didn't really idolize celebrities. I never got a crush on one, I didn't have any posters hung up in my room, I didn't strive to be like one of them. I can't tell you for certain, but I suspect it was because I didn't think much of myself. My self-esteem was so low that I couldn't deem myself worthy of any kind of relationship with a person like that, even a parasocial one. Funnily enough, that was also true of fictional characters. I wouldn't dare to associate myself or imagine myself being friends with the characters I liked. But I'm getting a bit ahead. Going back to real people, as I grew older and worked on my self-esteem issues, I noticed a peculiar shift in perspective. As I started to realize that celebrities were also human like myself, and not some unreachable celestial beings, I began to idolize them more than before. I started obsessing over certain people. Not actors or musicians, mostly YouTubers. They felt even closer to me and the people around me because of their sincerity, and that became the driver of my obsession. I'd constantly daydream about them, sometimes write fanfiction. At some points in my life, when I felt the most unstable, my fantasies took some real ugly shapes, but it didn't go any further than that. I never tried to reach out to these people, and I didn't post my fanfiction anywhere, which I am thankful for. Good thing I always realized it wasn't healthy for me or desirable for them. I've come a long way since then, but I still struggle with those obsessions. It became a prominent coping mechanism of mine, and whenever I feel scared, weak, or unloved, I roll right back into obsessing over YouTubers. My brain tends to choose people who are similar to me in some way, but seem to have something that I lack, be it friends, social skills, or the confidence to be unapologetically themselves. To me, they look almost perfect. In reality though, these people might be as frustrated with their lives as I am with mine, feeling just as lacking in certain aspects of it. And in reality, there is nothing inherently wrong with me. At least, that's what my therapist says. The last thing I want to talk about is relationships with fictional characters. This section will include AI chatbots as well. There's not much left to say on the matter, because this type works pretty much the same as the others. But to me, this one is the most depressing and dejected. I'm a touchy-feely kind of guy, and I couldn't care less about abstractions that are detached from physical reality. That's why I don't like math. I know that the universe runs on formulas, but you get what I mean. If I can't lick it, it ain't worth pondering. For that reason, whenever I get a crush on a fictional character, it just straight up makes me want to kill myself. The shit gets bad, especially considering how much real people piss me off. The thought that I can never be friends or partners with a certain character, even in theory, it just breaks my heart. Some people try to resolve this issue by creating chatbots of their favorite characters. Not gonna lie, despite openly hating on AI, I do occasionally talk to these bots. Mostly for fanfic inspiration, and even for that, they're not very good. Like, not to toot my own horn here, but I can tell good literature from bad, and the data they train these bots on is usually hot garbage. And with them having the memory of an amoeba, I can't suspend my disbelief even for a couple of messages. But would I want the bots to get better? Well, hard to say. I feel like it would do more harm than good, but I can't help but be curious to see it happen. Okay, we're finally done. Gee, I didn't expect that a sudden flu would get me back into writing stuff. Not sure it's a good thing. This video feels more like me unraveling my mind in public just for the sake of it, and for the most part, that is what it is. You know, I tend to see people not as, well, people, but as case studies. Myself included. It's sort of a special interest of mine, psychoanalyzing people. It scratches a certain itch in my brain, and I thought that someone may find it entertaining as well. But if you're not into that, and want some sort of essay-like conclusion, I gotcha. The internet has made us less empathetic and tolerant of each other's quirks. It's much easier to brush off the feelings of a person that you can't see, hear, or touch. And it's easier than ever now to lock yourself in a bubble of circle jerks and deem everyone who isn't a part of it cringe. I think that parasocial relationships are not an issue in and of themselves. They're a symptom of the inherent human loneliness and a mean to an end. A way to fill the void that everyone has to some degree, and should be treated as such. In short, hug your veggies, eat your mom, be a good boy. See ya.